Welcome everyone to the All Candidates Forum, today here in Powell River, brought to you via live stream by Powell River Peak on Facebook and also by Last On, Last Off Productions. I'm Teles Cevedas, President of the Powell River Chamber of Commerce. I'm very happy to be here today with our three candidates. On my right, on my left, we have Nicholas Simons, our incumbent. Then we have Kim Darwin from the Green Party, from the NDP is Nicholas Simons. And Sandra Stoddart Hansen from the Liberal Party. So what we're going to be doing today is a small format. They're going to have 3 minutes each to introduce themselves. And then we're going to have some questions for them. And you can write in your questions via Facebook. We'll be asking some of those as well. Please make sure your questions are proper and they follow the protocols of this forum, please. During the question period, the candidates will be allowed 2 minutes to answer, and they guarantee me they will not go over, and there will be no debate during this forum. So, I'll let each candidate introduce themselves, starting with Nicholas Simons.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Teles, and thank you to the organizers of this forum. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're on the territory of the Tla'amin Nation, and I honor the elders and the leaders of the nation and look forward to continuing to work with Tla'amin. And here we are in beautiful Powell River in an election campaign that is essentially about choosing whether to continue on our steady recovery through this pandemic or to go a different direction. And I have sat at tables like this in the past at previous elections, and I have been in a position of calling out a government for failing to look after the needs of children in this province, for allowing the Wild West of financial contributions to exist in our political system. We decried the fact that the MSP continued to punish lower and middle income people. We were actively trying to ensure that our government recognized the need to improve or increase the minimum wage. And here we are in 2020 with an opportunity to continue programs and policies that reverse all of those negatives. In the first 3.5 years of the new Democrat government, we've accomplished some very significant improvements, not just to public policy, but to programs and services that British Columbians have been asking for so long. So it's really an honor and it's a privilege to be in this position, to be able to offer to the people of Powell River-Sunshine Coast a choice to continue on that steady road through this difficult time, to emerge healthy and strong and in a position to take full advantage of the resources and the people of this province. So I'm very pleased to have this opportunity. I hope everyone gets a chance to have their questions answered, and I look forward to doing that myself.
Thank you, Nicholas. And now we'll move on to Kim Darwin from the Green Party.
So yes, I am speaking to you today from the traditional territories of the Tla'amin Nation, but I actually reside in the Sechelt territories. And as most of us know, also in our area is the Squamish Nation and the Klahoose Nation as well. So I was born on Muscogee Island, and I moved to Sechelt when I was 2. So I am through and through a coastal girl, having lived here my entire life in this riding. Strangely, my family on Muscogee Island can't vote for me because it is not in our riding. But what I want to say today is none of us really should be here today. In fact, we're in the middle of an unnecessary election in one of the biggest health and economic crises of the century. MLA should be in Victoria working on solutions. Governments should be flowing supports to keep our small businesses alive, of which we have so many in our community, Upper and Lower Sunshine Coast. But instead, the NDP have put their political interests ahead of people. They put the brakes on working together, which we were doing very well over the last 3.5 years, and put their interests ahead of people. This election is our chance to send a clear message to old school professional politicians and doing politics differently is built into the BC Green DNA. In fact, the BC Greens want to build economic, social, environmental, and fiscal sustainability for our community, our province, and for our future. BC Greens want to seize the opportunity of green jobs in the emerging technological revolution to fight back the pandemic and build on long-lasting sustainable economic recoveries for our community and British Columbia. BC Greens have brought a fact-based approach to tackling all of the social challenges that COVID-19 has absolutely laid bare. Here in Powell River, that includes housing that's affordable for working families and a return of a healthy forest sector, and for seniors care that's not driven by patients, that is driven by patients, not by profits, for our lower Sunshine Coast, tackling the opioid crisis that touches so many of our lives, and fixing BC Ferries levels so that it is actually serving our communities. We've really seen very little progress on these files over the last 3.5 years, and I'm recommending that you vote green in order to send a strong message that you expect a new approach to this new normal that we've all found ourselves in. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kim. And now we'll hear from Sandra from the Liberal Party.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Sandra Stoddart Hansen, and I'm honored to be running as the BC Liberal candidate in the Powell River-Sunshine Coast riding. I'd like to thank the Chamber for organizing this event and the Town Centre Hall for the COVID safety precautions they've taken to keep us all safe. And to my fellow candidates, this is my first time out of the gate running as a candidate, and I have immense respect for you for standing to run in this election, in any election for that matter. I'm sure that all of us agree, and we were talking a little earlier about the challenges of campaigning during a pandemic. We are having this election in the midst of the second wave of the pandemic. And in my view, the whole election is completely unnecessary. The Green Party, the BC Liberals, and the NDP were working collaboratively under the exceptional leadership and direction of Dr. Bonnie Henry to guide us through the pandemic. There was absolutely no need for an election to change course that way. In my view, this was a power grab, pure and simple, and not in the best interests of British Columbians. Let me talk for a moment about the BC Liberal platform as it's been laid out over the past couple of weeks. I think that the Liberal platform recognizes that we need to rebuild BC from the devastating effects that the pandemic has had on our economy and on our confidence. And I think that we have put forward a sound path to economic and social recovery. As an example, eliminating the provincial sales tax for 1 year to stimulate the economy and investing in infrastructure to get people back to work makes good sense. The Liberal commitment to invest $1 billion in seniors' housing and tax credits to make sure that seniors can stay in their homes a little longer and that no senior will have to share a room in a care home. Investing in transportation infrastructure such as the Massey Bridge to keep traffic moving, easing what's perhaps Canada's worst highway bottleneck. And I know I commuted the opposite direction in that for 3 years, and it was just an awful situation. Now I'd like to talk for a moment about our riding. I believe we need a strong voice in Victoria, and if elected into a BC government, into a BC Liberal government, I have our leaders' commitment that we would begin construction of the bypass highway from Langdale to Seashell with an initial investment of $50 million. I also have the commitment to conduct an immediate and comprehensive review of ferry services. In my view, it's no secret that the Langdale Horseshoe Bay route is not meeting the needs of our community and visitors to our community. In my view, capacity, frequency, on-time performance, and certainty of travel are all issues that must be resolved, and I would make this a priority action. The investment in, is that my 2 minutes? Thank you. The investment in seniors housing, if I am elected as your MLA representing a riding that ranks the top for the
Sandra,
greatest.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I thought that was my 2 minute
No,
warning.
that was 3 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
terribly sorry about that. So we'll start off with some questions here. Okay. So when we do hear that little bell, what we should do, Kim, is actually, if we could have it set at 1:30, right, the timer, that way the candidates know that they have 30 seconds past that bell to continue, all right?
Thank you.
So we'll start at 1:30 for the bell.
Even 1:45 is good in 15 minutes.
15 seconds? All right, 1:45, please.
So it's gonna go off at 1:45.
Okay.
Got it.
So this being virtual, it's a little bit of a learning curve for all of us.
We're all in this together.
So we'll start off with the first question, and the first question is going to go to Nick, and then we're going to go to Kim, and then to Sandra, and then we're going to start off with the next set of questions to Kim, then Sandra, then Nick. The forest industry on the coast has been under attack from various special interest groups over the past few years. The forest industry is very sustainable, and the revenues from forest management, stumpage mostly, play an important role maintaining the health of the vibrant BC economy. Is the forest industry important to you? If so, how will you do your part to support the forest industry over the next 4 years?
Well, thank you very much for that question. Yes, the forest industry is significant, and it's sort of a cornerstone industry of the province, and has been for a long time. And the reality is that the province of BC, the NDP government, has made major investments into forestry, into addressing some of those issues that the questioner raised with respect to special interests. And you know what? My special interest to me is the community benefiting from the forest industry from which it works. And what we saw, unfortunately, in the previous government, we've had 3.5 years to start correcting some of those major errors, had to do with disassociating the industry from the communities from which it works. So we need to make sure that we invest properly in value added for our forest sector, so that we get the maximum value from a resource that we need to properly maintain and sustain the forest industry. And so jobs on the Sunshine Coast are incredibly important in both mills. We've seen challenges with external markets. We've seen challenges obviously with COVID as well. And so a re-elected John Horgan government will continue to ensure that the forest sector remains vibrant, that it's a sustainable industry, that we have it for generations to come, and that we overcome some of the challenges that we're currently facing.
Thank you, Nick. Kim?
Yeah, we all know that forestry built many of our communities. In fact, Powell River was built on forestry and fishing, but the governments of the past few years haven't seen forestry as much of an economic opportunity as what it actually is. So both the NDP and the BC Liberals have failed to manage them as one of our greatest resources. It is a renewable resource, but only if it's managed effectively. And we've found that there are 5 main companies that have, one of the large companies that have 80% of the licenses. And that those companies have not been benefiting our communities. So we need the government's forest management to be reformed so that the sector serves the long-term needs of our local communities and supports truly sustainable industries with the community and the ecosystem values at the core. So the trees are no longer with climate change. They're not just fiber. They also help us fight climate change. So the value of forests is now different than what it was before we knew about climate change. So we need to reform who has the right to harvest wood and start moving so that it's not just those large companies. I grew up in a logging community. My stepfather was a log scaler and a boom man. My brother owns a logging company on Vancouver Island. We need to go back to those small business owners, what we used to call JIPO outfits, and to community forests in partnership with our Indigenous communities. So as the Greens, we're going to manage the forests more holistically.
15 seconds.
Oh, that was 15 seconds, thank you. And we would like to have an independent commissioner to ensure that all the value of the forest is managed, not just the cutting of the timber. We'll also stop glyphosate spraying in our forests, which is very damaging, and immediately end the logging of old growth forest and high-risk ecosystems across the province. Hard stop.
Thank you, Kim. And Sandra?
Well, I do agree with both Nicholas and Kim that forestry is a really important component of our sector, province-wide, and certainly in this community. Under the NDP, since the start of 2019, there have been 45 full or partial mill closures in BC, and over 10,000 workers have lost their jobs in the forest industry. Instead of supporting our forest-dependent families and communities, the NDP have cancelled the Rural Dividend Fund, eliminating much-needed assistance to smaller communities. The industry, in my view, is in crisis, and I think it's up to the government, the BC Liberal government, we hope, after the 24th, to work with industry to modernize forest management practices and ensure the BC forest industry is no longer the highest cost producer in North America. I also believe we need to work very aggressively with the federal government to make real progress and reach a fair resolution of the softwood lumber dispute and find a solution that works for British Columbia, defend British Columbia's interests in softwood lumber trade issues. I think that we need to increase our investments in silviculture to enhance the province's tree planting efforts and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We need to introduce legislation to protect the working forests and provide increased certainty on the land base while protecting environmental values.
Thank you very much, Sandra. So the next question, we're going to start off with Kim. So the question is, what are you willing to do to help the industrial base expand in Powell River?
Well, really it comes down to listening to the community. As you know, I live in Seashelt, and I've been up here throughout 2017, and every year I come up for a variety of the events here to really get a feel for the community and what the community needs. So it is about listening. In fact, when you're a politician, some people think that you're supposed to come with all the answers, but that's not what it's about. It's about listening to the community and understanding they have the solutions for their own community. So I know that there's been a guillotine hanging over this community with the closure of the mill for so many years. And there's so many different ideas that people have come to me over the last few years that we could do for this community. A lot of ecotourism as well. I think we've seen a shift, as forestry has gone down and not created so many jobs, that there are other opportunities through ecotourism. Now, whether we can convert the mill to something that is going to be usable for the future, there's so much technology out there, perhaps there is, but again, it's about listening to the community about what they want, not me having come from Seashell and saying, we're going to do this.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Sandra?
Well, I echo Kim's thoughts that listening to the community is really important, and I would say that one of the unforeseen benefits of the COVID pandemic is it's taught us all to think differently about the way we do work and about the potential for inviting industries or inviting businesses to come into our community to operate on the understanding that they can work differently, that they can work from home, that they can use Zoom, that they can use Skype, that they can use technological tools. I also think that in terms of climate protection, industries that are emerging in our economy, such as solar energy or wind power, that we should work hard to look for opportunities in our community to attract some of those newer energy markets and get those products built and tested and up and running in our community. So I think that we have an opportunity to kind of reinvent ourselves and find new and different things that we can bring to our community in terms of economic activity and economic generators in the business community.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sandra. Nick?
If I remember the correct question correctly, sometimes we get off track a little bit, but I believe you're talking about how to ensure that we can encourage industry to...
How to increase the industrial base.
Okay, so, well, first of all, we have to make sure we take care of the industrial base as well, and we look after the jobs and the pensions of the people who work here now, and I think we need to continue to do that. As a representative, your responsibility, or one's responsibility, would be to ensure that anyone interested in pursuing economic activity or economic development here has people to go to, people to talk to, people to connect with others. And that's partly the responsibility of the MLA, to ensure that the right people are talking to each other. I think we have a lot of success in terms of looking after our community, making it a healthy community. I think industry is interested in going places where there is a strong, educated workforce, where there's housing for their employees, where there's an adequate transportation system that isn't going to interfere with business practices. So I think that the Sunshine Coast offers a lot to industry if they're looking for a place to set up. And anytime that opportunity arises, I know that we have great ambassadors and representatives at local government level as well, who are always on the lookout for potential employers settling in this community.
Thank you, Nick. The next question will be starting with Sandra. And the question is, given the uncertainty and actual cost of Site C dam, is it really beyond the point of no return? Would it not be time to put that money into jobs elsewhere, even if that means further utilizing the dams and reservoirs we already have currently?
Well, I will confess right up front that I'm not an expert on the Site C project, but I think so much has been invested to this point that it behooves us to continue with that investment. If we really do want to transform our economy and reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, I believe that we need to find these new energy sources. And the energy source, hydro, is readily available in our province, and I think we need to take advantage of that. It's of all the sources of energy, perhaps the cleanest when you think of the other alternatives of natural gas-fired plants, of coal-fired plants, of nuclear plants. The hydro option seems to be the most appealing in my perspective. And so I think that the engineers and the individuals who are looking at the seismic issues of the plant will find solutions for that, and that we should continue to go ahead and complete the Site C project to provide clean energy for us for the future.
Thank you, Sandra. Nick?
Yeah, well, I think most people on the Sunshine Coast know that that this was an issue that I was concerned about, and I remain concerned about it. The previous government, in its recklessness, decided and actually said publicly that they would push the project past the point of no return. When the last election campaign was taking place, we committed to undertaking an investigation into the situation and determine what to do from there. And the decision was made to continue. The decision was made that $4 billion investment couldn't be just, we can't turn our back on it, as it would represent a significant cost to the people of British Columbia. I think new information is always important. We don't turn our heads away when new information comes to us, and I think it's absolutely fair to say that, you know, the Green and NDP agreement somehow this wasn't part of it, and I'm not sure why it wasn't, but this is where we are, and I think that the Site C project will be reviewed, continue to be reviewed. Premier Horgan appointed another person to check to see what the actual situation was, and we have issues around geological stability, so that's something that has to be continually watched. But the decision was to continue because of a government that just decided on an ideological basis to go forward. It wasn't the project that John Horgan would have chosen. It wasn't a project that we would have chosen, but the project's continuing.
Thank you, Nick.
Would you like me to go ahead?
Sorry?
Would you like me to answer now?
Yes,
I'm
please.
dying to. So,
Sorry, Ken.
Nick, there wasn't, part of the confidence and supply agreement was that the NDP would send this to the BC Utility Commission. But what the Greens didn't realize is that the NDP wouldn't listen to what the BC Utility Commission said. It was not beyond the point of no return. Even Christy Clark came out recently and said it was not beyond the point of no return. So we cannot blame the BC Liberals for the NDP going through with it. And even when Site C was estimated to cost $8.8 billion, we had 5 alternatives that were a quarter the cost. So now, even with the sunk costs, it is, and with the geological issues that we've known about for probably 30 years, in fact, even the design of Site C was changed to do an L shape because of the geological issues. That design has never been implemented anywhere in the world. So we don't even know if it's going to work if they do proceed further. Dr. Harry Swain, the chair of the Joint Review Panel, reviewed 5 different options that we had, again, that were a quarter of the cost when it was going to cost $8.8 billion. Now it's 12 billion, 13, 14, we don't know. We're expected as British Columbians to write a blank check. I would say we need to stop it now and invest in the renewable energy that was even available to us, back before Christy Clark started pushing this to the point of what she thought was no return. So I would like to see it stopped.
Thank you, Kim. So we'll start off with the next set of questions, and this time we're going to go to Nick. Is the fixed link update proposal that would connect Powell River to the rest of the province with a deep sea port in Jarvis Inlet a possibility or a dead issue if your party came to power?
Well, these proposals have come before us in the past. I recognize that the Third Crossing Society has changed their route significantly from their original proposal. I think ultimately what people are trying to reflect in their desire for increased transportation is that they think that we could serve as a third export port. So we'd have Vancouver, Prince Rupert, and Powell River. That would require major infrastructure investment, probably in the multi-billion-dollar range. If a proposal came forward and someone wanted to present it to the Minister of Transportation or to the Premier, those are the kind of things that I'm happy to arrange. If I saw a project that made sense financially, I would obviously have a look at it and make a determination myself and see what others would think. But I don't see that as an immediate plan. I don't see it in anyone's proposed platform. But if we're talking about improving the transportation links, I'm all in favor.
Thank you. Kim?
So we have far higher infrastructure priorities here in Powell River and the Sunshine Coast besides building multi-lane freeways. These large infrastructure projects, to increase traffic, just don't really square with where we're supposed to be going with climate action. So on the Lower Sunshine Coast, we go to stage 4 water restrictions nearly every year. Luckily, the last few years have been a bit wetter in the summer. So when you think about, and I know your party has said that they will invest $50 million in the bypass, that will then bypass all of our small businesses and our communities on the Lower Sunshine Coast, and I just don't see that that is going to help our communities grow. Not only that, all of our homes are linked to our Sunshine Coast Highway. That's how we get to our shopping and to our jobs and back from our worship. And I think if we invest, there's only so much infrastructure funds available, and if we invest it in a multi-lane highway up the back through the forest, how much infrastructure funds are going to be left to fix our current road that needs a lot of work? In fact, we had studies over studies, and I think Lund, their road needs to be repaired desperately. So if we put all our money in a bypass that bypasses our communities, are we going to see those repairs that we need to the roads that link us to our homes? So I think the fixed link to me it's not a responsible investment of money personally. And I'm not the type of politician that's going to say what I think you want to hear or say I'm going to study it when I really do think it's the wrong idea. But if the community said they absolutely wanted it and the evidence was there that it was good for the community as a representative, I would go forward with that. But I personally I can't swear that.
Thank you. Sandra?
Well, I think it's an interesting concept of the fixed link, but I don't see it as a viable project, particularly now where the emphasis has to be on economic recovery after the COVID crisis. I think that that's a project that is into the future and would not be one that I've seen an appropriate business case for. So I wouldn't be inclined to pursue that unless there was a compelling business case, and I certainly have not seen that.
Thank you. Next set of questions we'll start with Kim. In April 2019, the government gave all unionized community support workers in the social services industry a 2% raise, but did not give the same raise to non-unionized workers who are doing the same jobs. What is your view on this? Is it a mistake? Should it be corrected, and when?
It is a mistake. It is absolutely unfair. The non-union workers are doing the exact same care as the union workers. And in fact, there was a study that said that the wage disparity is up to $6 an hour different for the non-unionized workers. And I think the wages that the unions are paying is fair. Could even be more, as we've seen through COVID-19, especially in a lot of the seniors care facilities, that the work that our caregivers are doing, they are the front line workers of caring for our seniors and for in our hospitals and whatnot. So it should be corrected immediately. It's not fair.
All right, thank you, Kim. Sandra?
Well, I would agree with Kim on that score. I think it's unfair to accord a 2% increase to one group and not to the other group that's doing the same kind of work just because they belong to a union or they don't belong to a union. So I would agree with Kim on the answer to that question.
All right, thank you, Sandra. Nicholas?
Okay, so first of all, I don't think we're talking about healthcare workers in long-term care or in community care, where our government has actually said that we need to make sure that there is wage parity across the long-term care sector. That's clear. That was clear before the pandemic, and it remains clear. And our government has actually made the commitment to ensure that the wage top-ups to match union and non-union or private and non-profit care are the same. So there are benefits from belonging to a union, including the right to negotiate agreements and the right to negotiate contracts. And while on the face of it, what really needs to be looked at is the issue of getting wages up in general. There's always a question of unfairness if one bargaining group gets a particular settlement and the other doesn't. But I think what we just need to do is try to make sure that the sectors that serve our communities are treated fairly, that workers are being paid appropriately, and I know that belonging to a union often helps ensure that.
Thank you, Nick. So the next question, we're going to start off with Sandra. What is your view on open net fish farms on our coastal waters that are polluting the oceans with effluent and spreading disease amongst natural ocean life? Will you help cancel approvals and move fish farms onto shore?
Well, I believe that that we need to rely on good science in terms of making those decisions about whether those licenses should be canceled. And I'm not aware that there's been sufficient scientific evidence to suggest that they need to be canceled, that the issues such as sea lice aren't manageable. However, that being said, I think preferentially moving those operations onto shore, as is the case with the beluga or the caviar operation in seashell, is a much preferable way because it separates the fish into onshore containers rather than being open net in the ocean.
Right, thank you, Sandra. Nicholas?
Yeah, well, this is an issue that governments have made efforts to address. In fact, one major effort to address fish farms on the West Coast was the Cohen Commission, which studied the impact of open net fish farms of Atlantic salmon in our Pacific waters. They made a number of recommendations, and they put a number of deadlines on those recommendations, including the removal of the fish farms in the Broward Archipelago by September 2020. And what we've seen is intransigence on the part of the Liberal and Conservative governments in Ottawa. And I think we should probably be talking about constitutional issues when it comes to the federal government having a say over what really is the direct impact on our communities. I've always been troubled by the fact that situations like this, you find competing evidence, competing scientists, and the public is supposed to sort of try to follow and see what truth can emanate from the discussion. And what we have to rely on is these independent studies like the Cohen Commission or like the Sustainable Aquaculture Commission that the BC NDP ran under the previous government, and follow the recommendations that were made. So now the federal government's starting to say they're going to talk to the Indigenous communities. There are a lot of factors at play. We have to realize that there are considerations of the environment that are highest priority. There are issues around jobs, and there are issues around the cost of moving on to closed containment. And all those are a possibility, but I think that the federal government has to do their job.
Thank you. Kim?
So Adam Olsen, MLA in Saanich, also BC Green MLA, he was our interim leader. He has done a great deal of work on this file. And the Cohen, we're an evidence-based decision-making party, and the Cohen Commission's recommendations are something that we would absolutely support. And I think there is enough evidence to show that the fish farms are affecting our wild salmon. And it's quite mind-boggling that we don't take quicker action. I mean, when are we going to really start taking it seriously when the fish are gone? We've seen what happened back east with their fisheries, in Scandinavian countries where they had fish farms, what it's done to their wild salmon stocks. The evidence is there. We absolutely need to move these fish farms out of the oceans along the corridors where our wild salmon go. And again, what Sandra said, so Northern Divine caviar on the Sunshine Coast in Seashell Island, just down the road, it is an absolute brilliant example of how land-based aquaculture can work very effectively. And I do know that the cost of land is probably going to be cost prohibitive, but in partnership with our First Nations community, we're talking about their traditional foods and protecting them for their future generations is absolutely vital, and to everybody along the coast. I think all of us remember going out fishing when we were kids, and you'd go out and you would come back with a salmon every time. Now you go out there and you get skunked more often than not.
Thank you. So the next question we'll start off with Nick. Would you immediately petition the federal government to close the commercial herring fishery, and why?
Oh, would I? These kind of...
You and your party.
Yeah, I think, obviously, when people want politicians to say, yeah, I'll do it or I won't do it, what I would do as a representative is get the information that I need to make an informed decision on that particular petition. And I would rely on the experts that we have, not just around here in BC, but other experts as well, to ensure that whatever decision we make is in the best interest of the ecology of our oceans. We need to make sure that that the interest of the public is protected, and the interest of the public is the protection of our environment. So, obviously the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada makes decisions that they claim to be based on the science that they have. So whatever action I would take, whatever petition I would make, it would be one that would be based on information that I have and the evidence that I would have.
Thank you, Nicholas. Kim?
So I don't think a provincial politician can make the federal government necessarily do anything, but we can lobby for it. And the reason for closing the herring fishery would have to be really clear that we talk about the circle of life, and we know that our resident killer whales are on the decline, they're on the brink of extinction. And the circle of the food chain, if we need to do that, even temporarily, again, the evidence would have to be there. I'm not an expert in this field, so I don't know whether it is. But if it was determined that closing the herring fishery for a period of time would exponentially increase the salmon and increase, the viability of the whales, I would lobby for it. But again, the evidence would have to be there, and I'm not an expert.
All right, thank you, Kim. Sandra?
Well, I would agree with both my colleagues at the table that I would admit too that I'm not an expert, and certainly if the issue became before me, I would want to look at the science as well and want to inform myself before saying yay or nay to any decision.
All right. Thank you, Sandra. Do you all find that sanitizer, you can't flip pages anymore? So this time we'll start off with Kim. Will you act to implement incentives for small-scale renewable energy development, such as wind, solar, microhydro, including private residences?
This is something that's very near and dear to my heart. So I wrote a policy for the BC Chamber of Commerce on this very issue because I saw that our BC Chamber of Commerce and the Canadian Chamber of Commerce didn't have anything to support renewable energy. I believe that this is one of British Columbia's greatest opportunities. And again, this leads into why we really don't need Site C down. The costs of wind and solar have gone down so much that they are economically viable. So having incentives for homeowners to put this type of infrastructure on their home, connecting it to our energy grid, it gives energy independence, which I know, some larger, organizations like BC Hydro maybe don't want that energy independence and, want to build these large infrastructure projects like Site C, but I am such a proponent of this. I was just talking to a gal who moved to Powell River from Germany, and when she got here, she was absolutely shocked at how little solar and wind we have. In fact, British Columbia has virtually no offshore wind, which is one of the cheapest types of energy to build, and you can build it closer to communities with shorter transmission lines. There are so many opportunities that British Columbia, we're missing the boat on, so I would be thrilled to provide incentives on this type of energy.
Thank you, Kim. Sandra?
Oh, I too think that incentives are the way to go for small-scale energy projects, whether it be solar or wind. My husband comes from Denmark, and so we've traveled back there to visit family on many, many occasions. And the number of wind projects in Denmark, not so much solar projects, but certainly wind projects, and the inventive way that they've transformed what is a polluting industry, that's cows that produce milk and all that wonderful Danish cheese. They have sites throughout Denmark, especially in Jutland, where they take cow manure and transform it into gas and then feed that gas into the electrical grid. They heat whole cities with the heat output as well as the energy output. I just think it's absolutely brilliant. Very small footprint for the plant. They have high energy garbage burning facilities, and I don't think that we've even touched the successes that they've had over there. I think we need to learn from them. And just in terms of microeconomics of this, I think We've had projects that governments have sponsored beforehand, like the CHIP project to improve insulation, reducing your energy utilization. I think we need to look at those again, that kind of initiative, to encourage people to become less dependent and more independent with their energy utilization on a personal level.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Nick?
Yeah, I would definitely encourage alternative power sources wherever we could. I would point out that British Columbia has a climate action plan that was created by the BC NDP and with the Green Party. We've made a number of important steps towards addressing our climate emissions, and I think we have obviously work to do, but we can be proud of the work we've done so far. It is the most ambitious climate plan on the continent. Dr. Weaver was instrumental, along with my colleague George Heyman, in creating that plan. We passed the Accountability Act to legally require government accountability on emissions targets. We've increased the carbon price rebates for low and middle income families, which helps people accept and understand that carbon pricing is here. We've rebated the electric vehicles and home efficiency upgrades. These are not the most flashy kind of projects, but they add up and they mean a lot to our climate targets. We're funding schools, hospitals, and universities to reduce their energy consumption as well. So it's all tied together. We have the demand side, we have the production side, and we have to make sure that what we do and the policies that we put forward encourage innovation, which is something our government is definitely investing in. Innovation and pursuit of cleaner energy options.
Thank you, Nick. All right, so we have another question now. I haven't skipped anyone, I don't believe. And we'll start off with Sandra on this one. Do you believe the provincial government, prior to making changes to land use planning, be required to conduct public consultation in the equal way local governments are already legally required to follow, such as in Ministry of Agriculture and changes to the ALR?
Yes, I believe there should be a public consultation process. That's
Thank you.
all I have to say.
Thank you. Nick?
I'm proud to say there was massive public consultation with every piece of legislation with respect to the agricultural land reserve. We should remember, in 1973, we were losing about 3,000 hectares of farmable land in the Fraser Valley alone, and the progressive New Democratic government of the early 1970s put in place rules to protect farmland for future generations, we would have a place to grow our food. I think that the basic principle that we protect farmland for food growing and food growing land is essential, and there are ways for land use changes to occur through the Agricultural Land Commission process. So public consultation, yes, when we decide what legislation would encompass the agricultural land reserve, and in specific decisions around specific applications, we leave that to the arm's length body, which is the Agricultural Land Commission.
All right, thank you. Kim?
If I heard your question correctly, it wasn't just about ALR land, but it was about other land use planning, which would also include, logging in watersheds or soil dumps in watersheds and things like that, if I understand correctly. And absolutely, 100%, the communities must be consulted on these things. In fact, most of our jurisdictions don't even have, our municipal governments don't even have a say on these issues that the provincial government does have a say on. So I'll give you for instance, on the Lower Sunshine Coast, our watershed that supplies most of the people on the Lower Sunshine Coast is in a provincial park. And whenever we want to do anything with that, whether it's to increase flows or anything, we have to go to the provincial government, and we get sort of quagmired in this whole conversation. Or if BC Timber Sales wants to log and there's gonna be slope instability, we don't really have a say. Our community doesn't have a say. And we need to start becoming, what is the thing, we act local, I forget what that saying is, but we do have to allow our communities to have land use planning, decide where we want industry, decide where we don't want industry. And I think if we do that in advance, then we're not gonna have this NIMBYism. Then we're gonna give stability to industry and business, and they're gonna know where they can develop. And it'll lessen the timeframes for development permits and all of those other kinds of things, because the community will have already had a say and pre-planned.
All right, thank you. So, the bursaries offered to early childhood education and care students were based on a first-come, first-served policy. Because of this, many students did not receive any financial support through bursaries. So taking a loan was the only way to support studies. A lot of ECEC workers don't earn an adequate living wage to pay back a loan. On top of that, it can be very challenging. Powell River is a remote area, and there is a shortage of ECEC workers here. Would it be a big help? It would be a big help if our profession could use, if our profession could also be included in the BC loan forgiveness program. How would you be able to do this?
Oh, I think that's for me.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that question, and the need to hire more ECE workers is clear to everyone because of our, I think, wonderful childcare program. I couldn't think of a better word. It's a wonderful childcare program that we have started. It was a major social program that we promised in 2017, and we delivered in large part with a lot to go. But by expanding the number of spaces for families to access, and by ensuring that they are in all communities around the province, we also need to ensure that we have the right staff, so we can staff facility or child care centers properly. Loan forgiveness is a good idea. I think that's one of the ones that we could use. It's used in many places to attract medical professionals to remote communities or difficult to access communities. And I think maybe that could be used here. But one of the things we've also done is invested in more courses for ECE, so that we'll have more people coming out of the education system because they can access grants now, which they couldn't before, and they don't have to pay interest on their student loans anymore. And we're making it easier for people to find a career path, and I'm hoping that we make it an attractive career path for people, because we're going to need a lot of early childcare educators.
Thank you, Nick. Kim?
So many of you know that I ran for the leadership for the BC Greens, and I put forward a 6-part series of how we could move forward with an economic recovery as a result of COVID. And 60% of the job losses as a result of COVID affected women. So when we come out of a recession, normally it affects the blue collar workers, but in this one it affected mostly women. And one of the ways that we would move forward with an economic recovery is to absolutely invest in what is, one of the fundamental pieces for working moms, working parents, and that is investing in childcare, affordable, accessible childcare. So having the bursaries, we obviously need people to care for our children if we're going to invest in it. In the 1990s in Quebec, they invested in childcare, and it has now been attributed with putting 70,000 women into the workforce. And get this, it paid for the program itself due to the tax base that these working parents paid into the tax coffers. So this is an investment that has a return on the investment. It isn't an endless pit, some of the things that we spend, we don't expect to get a return, but this is a return. Not only that, Martha Friendly is one of the biggest Canadian advocates for early childhood education. And we know that children's learning is cumulative. So if they miss out on 1 year, they can't make it up. So early childhood education has a double benefit. It allows our parents to get to work and have adequate childcare, but it also has better learning outcomes for our children, and they will then be better future employees, employers, and leaders of our province. So investing into early childhood education is fundamental to that whole piece.
Thank you, Kim. Sandra?
Yes, I agree with what Kim has said. I think it's really important that we invest in developing the workforce that we'll need. Our party has pledged to $10 a day childcare as part of our platform, and improving the number of spaces that are available for working parents for childcare. I have a sister who has a PhD in education, and one of the main tenets of her research was on early childhood education, and she purports that the first 6 years of life are the most critical to your learning success and your success in developing life skills ongoing. And so I think it's enormously important for early child care workers to be available, trained, and accessible and fairly paid to do the job. So I think that the loan forgiveness program for those who weren't able to get into the line for bursaries makes a lot of sense.
All right, thank you. So our next question is, and this will be going to Kim first. The BC government requires anyone who turns 80 to undergo a series of exams before their driver's license is renewed. This is a form of ageism. This is a stereotype and/or discrimination against individuals or groups on the basis of their age. Would the candidates commit to eliminating this from ageism if they're elected? This form of ageism if they're elected?
I have a friend, well, he's since passed, but when his driver's license was taken away from him, I watched him essentially lose his will to live. It was an incredibly sad thing to watch. And the only thing that I kept saying to him is I kept saying, Jim, you know what, if only they had autonomous cars. And autonomous cars kind of freak a lot of people out, but that was the first time that I thought that was going to be something that would give our seniors who, he did have problems driving, he was unsafe on the road, but that's the first time that I thought, okay, I could get into this autonomous car business, perhaps for that reason alone. I don't know what the science is behind whether or is there any science? Was there any evidence when this was brought in by ICBC? I do not know the answer to that question. If there wasn't any science behind it, then yes, I would commit to not having it occur. And especially, I understand when they brought in this program that our seniors had to go to Vancouver in the city and take their exam for the first number of years, which I know I'm not as adept at driving in the city as I am in my own community. So I believe that practice has now been ended as a result of some pretty heavy lobbying to ICBC to have that changed. So,
Thank you. Sandra?
Well, in terms of that exam for over 80s, I know that seniors are really stressed to take that exam because right now they're being charged $250 to take the exam, and our party has committed that those fees would be waived and eliminated for seniors taking their exam to test their vision and their hearing and their competency and their capabilities to drive. I don't think that it's any mystery that as you age, some of your reflexes slow down. Sometimes your vision can be affected by by age, and so I think it's appropriate that they be tested to make sure that they're physically able and fit to drive. I have a 92-year-old sister-in-law who still has her driver's license, and unfortunately she has to be tested, this is in Ontario, every 6 months. But I don't think that seniors should have to pay for it, and I don't think that, as Kim has mentioned, that seniors should have to go across on the ferry to Vancouver. I would hope that that could be done locally within their own communities, which is where they drive.
Thank you.
Well, this was an issue that I took up here on the Sunshine Coast because of the fact that seniors were being subjected to not only a test through a company called Drive Able, but they were being referred to this company through an automatic age-based decision. And I think that, first of all, we have to remember that most seniors self-regulate when they drive. Many, if they don't feel comfortable, won't drive at night or won't drive in the rain. They make good executive decisions on that issue. What the problem was that the BC Liberals got friendly with a company that claimed that they had this perfect response. They had a computer test and they had a road test. And this Drive Able company, I don't know how they got themselves friendly with the BC Liberals, but suddenly they were making $500, $800 per test. We shouldn't base the test on the age. We have other ways of ensuring that drivers, only safe drivers, remain on the road. It's a bit of it's a concern to many seniors. It speaks to the fact that we have still a bit of a car culture, that many people are still, reliant or dependent on their vehicles. I wouldn't want it to be an automatic age 80 requirement, and if their test is required due to initial screening, then that test should be covered by the province, and it shouldn't be the burden to the senior.
Thank you. So, next question we have. It's a lengthy one. A petition was created to end logging discussions in regards to our old growth trees on the Sunshine Coast. These trees house rare spotted owls, black bear dens, culturally modified trees, some of the oldest trees in Canada dating back almost 3,000 years. I'm wanting to know if the candidates are willing to ensure this forest is protected.
Which forest are we talking about?
Old growth.
Old
On the
growth.
Sunshine Coast.
Old growth in general? Yeah, well, is that my question?
That is not your question. We are going to Kim.
I think I was first on the
Oh, were you?
last one, but I am happy to answer this one, if you would like.
Sorry. Then we're going to Sandra first.
Okay, this is only old growth areas on the Sunshine Coast, is that,
Yes.
did I hear the question correctly? I understand that the value add in terms of the value of the forestation in old growth areas is not really ideal. It also has the potential of damaging the watershed to log in the old growth areas. So I would support that petition to end logging in the old growth areas on the Sunshine Coast and elsewhere in the province too, where we have some remarkable old growth areas on Vancouver Island as well.
Thank you. Nick?
Yeah, well, because of the the lobbying, shall we say, from people on the Sunshine Coast and another part of Vancouver Island as well, over the issue of old growth logging, our government undertook a review, an old growth review. It came out a couple of months ago and contained 14 recommendations. These recommendations were widely seen as a very important step in how we are going to, as a province, address this issue. It involves industry, it involves Indigenous communities, it involves other communities as well. The good news is that the province has decided to set aside over 300,000 hectares of old growth while discussions with Indigenous communities can take place. That includes some 6,000 hectares on the Sunshine Coast. We've recently seen the deferral of the Dakota, quote-unquote, the Dakota Sanctuary. Yeah, I was just going to say that. Because of the identification, in large part because of the identification of culturally modified trees, where there are culturally modified trees and where there are species at risk, the special provisions have to be taken. I'm also going to point out that 60,000 hectares were set aside for marbled murrelet habitat to address some of the provincial responsibilities around meeting the Species at Risk Act. So a lot of very important and I think hopeful steps have been taken by our government, and I have no problem saying that we're going to carry on with that work to address the needs of our communities.
Thank you, Nick. Kim?
So the Dakota Bear Sanctuary contains about 30 bear dens on it, and our black bears require old growth forest for their hibernation homes. And as Nick said, there was a deferral, but that site has been deferred before, and it could be undeferred, and put back on the chopping block. I hiked up there about a month ago into that forest on one of the days that we had smoke everywhere. It was absolutely incredible. That Dakota Bear Sanctuary has never been touched by any human or natural disasters. And we did see the culturally modified trees that were modified probably in, I forget what year they said, but by the Squamish peoples that they used to forage in that forest. It is absolutely incredible. And in that forest, there is possibly the oldest tree in all of Canada. We brought up a lady from UBC who was a tree specialist, more than a silviculturist. I can't remember what the title was. And she did some dating of some of the trees. We have to realize with climate change that these trees, not only are they carbon capturers, but the soil below, when we log and clear cut, we release the carbon out of the soil. We do a double whammy by taking down the trees that also sequester carbon. We absolutely must not chop down any more of these high value old growth forests. We should limit our logging to second growth forests only. The BC Green Party will protect our remaining high value old growth forests forever. No deferrals, forever.
Thank you. Sandra?
I started with that question.
That's right. Sorry, I'm losing my mind a little bit here. So the next question, we're going to start with Nick. If Site C were shelved, how would your government propose to serve the electrical needs for the future? If everyone has an electric car and the demand will go up exponentially, there's no free lunch.
Well, I'll agree there's never a free lunch. My presumption is that other sources of energy would be found. Quite simply, it's, it'd be a policy decision based on, experts in energy. And I presume that we'd be left with a deficit. When we would be left with a deficit would be the question. How long we would have to develop other sources of energy, I guess, would be at play. But it does speak to the fact that we have, as a province, turned towards electrical power considerably, and perhaps that would put us in a bit of a predicament.
Thank you. Kim?
So if Site C dam was shelved, which I would love to see, like I said, Dr. Harry Swain, who was the chair of the Joint Review Panel on Site C, indicated, and this was a number of years ago, that we had, as I said before, 5 other options. One of which was the Columbia River Treaty that we have with the United States. and we are entitled to half of that power. It comes about 2 feet over the border, so that's one of them. As well as BC Hydro has identified a large amount of geothermal energy. And one of the things that I really like about moving forward with geothermal energy is a lot of the abandoned fracking wells in the northern part of our community. Part of the largest part of the expense with geothermal is the drilling. So those fracking, those abandoned fracking areas, they already have the areas drilled. So where it's appropriate, and geothermal isn't, you can't have it everywhere, there's certain areas, but those would be prime areas to develop geothermal. And especially in the Indigenous communities in the north, where we're still trucking in diesel to run generators for their electricity. If we provided energy independent to some of these Indigenous communities, then perhaps they could then finally get clean water, infrared to clean their water, and we can actually solve 2 things that are issues in those communities. As well as we have plenty of solar opportunities here. Like I said, the offshore wind is also an opportunity. And we have, I think, 30 different dams in British Columbia already operating without even using Site C. They can be used as batteries so that when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining, we store our energy there. So there, you know what, it's only the political will that we need to move forward with this renewable energy.
Thank you.
I think if I can just reflect back to the question is, if hypothetical question, if Site C were shelved, would demand go up exponentially? We don't have it online now, so I think it's important to look to the future. If Site C were to go ahead, I think it would provide us with energy self-sufficiency for many, many years to come. I don't disagree that it's important to look at alternate uses as well, wind, for example, and solar, for example, but I don't think that they can naturally satisfy the need that we have for electricity as we wean ourselves off carbon-based fuels. I just see demand going up and supply not being able to meet that demand in the future as we move forward with electricity as the way to fuel our vehicles, and electricity with the way to fuel our homes, for example. So I agree with the premise of the questioner that demand would go up exponentially if we don't develop new sources of hydroelectricity in this province.
Thank you, Sandra. So the next question is one of our most beloved questions here in Powell River, and it's all pertaining, and we all know this one, right? Ferries, right? How would you help the community by eliminating one of the ways that we pay for our local ferries?
Can you just repeat that? I didn't hear.
How would you help the community by eliminating one of the fares that you would pay for our local community? Right? And we'll start off this time. I do have my thing down properly with Kim.
So I know when I head back to the Sunshine Coast, I don't pay. But when you go to Vancouver Island, the Courtney Comox, I'm assuming is what the question is, so that you pay both ways?
Powell River pays 2 ways on both sides when you think about it.
Yeah.
Not when we go over to that side, we pay. When we come from that side, we pay.
Yeah.
When we go over to Vancouver, right, if they want to do a little bit of shopping,
Yeah.
right, we have to pay here, and then we have to pay on the way back. So there is no free ride unless we're just going to the one side,
Right.
right? At one point, right, sorry, I'll interject here. At one point,
It's become a debate.
no, at one point you only had to pay one way from Texada as well, right? You still do that, right? But the residents on Texada never had to pay, right?
Interesting.
And their bursaries for things like that.
Yeah.
So,
I'm a big proponent of the Coast Guard and an expansion on the Coast Guard. Also, I'm a big proponent, and I'll talk about the eliminating the fares. I don't think we can have a private corporation eliminate the fares. What the BC Green Party wants is for the BC Ferry operations to be returned as a Crown corporation. But my caveat is that we have to have a regulatory body that would govern that Crown corporation, one that has teeth and will protect the services and to make sure that there's no price gouging. So that is where it could fall in. It is our marine highway. It just is. We know that. Everybody here in Powell River and the Lower Sunshine Coast knows that this is our marine highway. It should be treated as such. In fact, I heard John Horgan say yesterday something about some infrastructure should, it belongs to all of us and we shouldn't have to pay. And I'm pretty sure he was talking about toll bridges. And I went, why doesn't that apply to BC ferries? So obviously, if it is our marine highway and it is a Crown corporation, I bet we could actually look at eliminating that, one of them. I'd also like to see, as part of an emergency safety measure, to see the ferry imported in Powell River, so at night. I think that is absolutely vital as we're in an earthquake-prone zone. We're prone to, climate, forest fires and things like that. I think it would be a real benefit to the community to have it imported here as well.
All right, thank you. Sandra?
I'd just like to respond a little bit to what Kim has said. There already is a regulatory body that looks after fares for BC Ferries, and that's the BC Ferry Commissioner, who rules on fare increases for BC Ferries. I think that, with my experience with the ferries, the notion of paying one way covers the cost of the trip for the two-way trip. And so for BC Ferries, I think it's a question of economies that they're able to realize by not having the ticket booth in two different locations. Just drive on, as you do with the Langdale ferry. You don't pay at Langdale, but you pay at Horseshoe Bay for the round trip. And so I think that, as ferries move to more of a reservation, a fuller reservation system, with a prepayment of fares, you will probably see the fares being charged both ways. I'm speculating on that. I'm no longer associated with the ferry authority, but I'm just speculating that they, in order to implement a more assured reservation system, that they would charge each way on the ferries, just as they do between Vancouver Island and Olsen and between Duke Point and Horseshoe Bay.
All right, thank you, Sandra. Nick?
I guess we've always suspected that those booths would be used to collect fares at Langdale at some point, or that maybe that little booth at Earl's Cove will be. But I think fundamentally we need to remember that under the BC Liberals, fares went up about 105% on the Texada route between 2003 when they privatized the company and 2017. And one of the first actions that our government did was reduce ferry fares on all 4 routes on the Sunshine Coast. All 4 routes in 2017 went back to 2011 rates. And that's a 15% reduction, and that is significant. And I remember attending rallies about ferries. It was always about the ferry fares. And since then, obviously, we've had an increase in the number of people using ferries. And the Langdale run, especially this past summer, especially during COVID, was just not meeting the needs of our communities. There's no denying that. And when talking to BC Ferries executive, they're saying we didn't hire the 450 summer people that we normally did. We normally do, so we couldn't add any sailings. And, as a representative of the Sunshine Coast, I can go and I can stand and shake my fist and wish for another ship and wish for more employees. But the company couldn't meet the changing conditions of the COVID situation. So what I did was ensure that people who needed to travel for medical reasons had an order from the Solicitor General saying that if you're traveling for medical reasons, you get assured loading. With respect to paying one way, that would be better. That would be far better. Home porting has been looked at, has been studied, has been rejected for reasons that are solely those who've made those decisions. So obviously, it would be a nice thing if we could get the home porting back to Powell River, but that's been something that I think talked about before I was born.
Thank you, Nick. So the next question, we'll start off with Sandra. How would you bring more specialized medical services to Powell River so our seniors don't have to go to the island or Vancouver?
Well, I think that over time, certainly on the southern part of our riding in the Seashell area, we have seen more and more specialists residing and opening practices on the southern part of the Sunshine Coast. And I think it's a question of where there's sufficient demand and where they can make a livelihood, they will relocate if there's enough of a demand. But there's also been a practice amongst the specialist physicians of coming to our community on certain days of the week. So on a certain day of every month, a dermatologist will come over and spend the day at our clinics on the lower part of the Sunshine Coast. So that may be something, I'm not aware of whether that happens in Powell River. I'm not aware of the number of specialists that currently reside in Powell River, but I can tell you where the demand warrants it. Those physicians can earn a reasonable living practicing specialty medicine in our communities, that they will do that. And in the interim, I think the idea of having locums and having specialty physicians come in for short periods of time to be able to service the needs of our communities is a good workable solution. And they seem to have been eager and able to do that in the southern part of the riding.
All right, thank you, Sandra. Nick?
A big challenge, obviously. We're still hoping to attract more physicians to our communities so that everyone can get a doctor, a family doctor, and that's still a challenge. So obviously we have to continue working on attracting people to our communities. Specialists are sometimes more difficult to attract just because of the economy of scale here. So as long as people are traveling to distant places for their treatment, we should be making sure that they can get there safely and back without having to worry about sitting in a ferry terminal for hours and hours. I think that the Oregon government has been clear that healthcare is its priority, not just during the COVID pandemic, but coming out of the COVID pandemic, we want our public healthcare system to be robust, prepared. We've already, I think, caught up on 2/3 of the surgeries that have been canceled or postponed. The scheduled surgeries that have been postponed because of COVID have already been made up for. I have great respect for the Minister of Health who, on the day that cancellations started because of COVID, already started planning on how they would be restored, how we would make up for the number of elective surgeries, scheduled surgeries that were postponed because of the need for capacity in our hospitals. So addressing this physician shortage, addressing issues around specialist access. I think every rural community wishes they had a specialist, every kind of specialist, but as we grow, the chances are we'll have ability to attract more.
Thank you.
So I'm one of the many people in British Columbia. I don't have my own personal doctor. My doctor decided she's only delivering babies, and I'm well beyond that, doing that. I think that most of our physicians and specialists they have to be set up as private companies. So for them to come into a community, that means that they're going to have an awful lot of overhead, rent space and whatnot. So that would be, I'm assuming, cost prohibitive for them if they don't feel like they will have enough clientele or patients in order to warrant that. So as Sandra said, on the lower coast, just down the road from me, there is a rental space that they specifically rent to physicians and specialists who come to town, so that they also don't have the cost burden of having to rent a place. So that's something that a community can do as they're trying to attract these specialists. And once they come here, they're going to love living here so much that they're going to want to stay and maybe semi-retire.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Who wouldn't?
So we're going to let you all collect yourselves for a little bit here, right? Prepare your closing statements.
Oh, is that time?
Right? And on our closing statements, since we're on this rotation right now, we're actually going to start with Nick again.
Is this a closing
Oh, wait,
statement?
no, sorry. No,
I think you're starting with Sandra.
I'll be starting with Sandra, yes.
No,
We're on to the closing statements at this
Yep, you
point?
can take a couple of minutes though. Prepare yourself if you need it.
Okay. I would like to do that.
All right. 2 minutes, thank you.
Come on, Mr. Whitaker, do a show for us. Has the audio been okay?
I'm not sure, I'm not connected.
It's still on.
Yeah.
Nobody complained that they couldn't hear us?
A select room, yes.
Oh.
The voices need to be blocked out.
For our closing statement.
There we go.
Well, I'm ready to go. Are you all ready?
Take your time. though.
Okay.
So now we'll have the closing statements of our candidates. And I want to thank them all for the wonderful job they've done this evening. I also want to thank our wonderful staff here again. And to Kim, our manager, that helps put this together every single time we have an election. Without her, we wouldn't be able to do any of these things. And Sandra, you may begin.
Well, I'll echo your thanks. I thought it was excellent with excellent questions, and thank you for the opportunity. It's a great way to connect with people, and I hope there are lots of you out there in streaming land listening in on our forum here today. I think I'd like to close with just a couple of notes about why me. I mean, why am I running, and who am I? Because I'm not well known in this part of the community at all. I live in Half Moon Bay. And I know that many of you watching tonight probably don't know of me and my background. So I thought I'd just close by saying that I'm an individual with long experience in the private sector and the public sector and the volunteer sector. I've worked for the federal government across Canada, and I have a significant amount of experience in the private sector. I was Vice President of Human Resources at Children's and Women's Hospital in Vancouver. I was the head of human resources for the federal department in Ottawa, so I bring that skill to my background. I also had the privilege of working with Transport Canada many years ago when Transport was a department of 24,000 people spread across the country. I worked mainly in the aviation sector and in the strategic planning sector of Transport Canada. I served as regional director in Winnipeg for Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Northern Ontario in the Central Arctic. And I have a long track record of experience in the volunteer sector, from chairing Dress for Success in Vancouver, from chairing the British Columbia Aviation Council. I've been a lifelong volunteer. I have an excellent reputation for being able to get things done. Anyone that's worked with me or for me can tell you that I have a lot of energy and a lot of creative ability to solve problems. I think I would be honored to serve, I know I would be honored to serve this riding as your MLA. To listen to you and to find measurable progress on the issues that are facing our riding. So thank you for this opportunity, and may everybody please get out and vote in this election.
Thank you, Sandra. Nicholas?
Oh.
Just keeping the scene more.
Well, it's a pleasure to have been here tonight, and I really appreciate having an opportunity to meet Sandra and see Kim again. And here we are in an important election, one that was, I think, sets a course for a steady recovery from a pandemic that has impacted all of us. I'm very confident that the leadership of John Horgan has been exceptionally steady and measured, and with the support of the professionals that he's surrounded himself with, and the leadership of Adrian Dix, I think, have been remarkable. And I can only expect that the way we've managed so far will be continued. I think the Premier's desire to see some continuity in our recovery process led him to believe that this is a good time to have an election, partly because we know that even election next year would likely be under the same circumstances, and because the agreement with the Greens when Dr. Weaver left substantially, made the agreement no longer valid in my view, and I signed the agreement. So I think that we have before us a choice, an important choice. We can continue with the strong pandemic response and a strong recovery, or we can take a course back to reckless tax cuts that hurt everybody. I can't even believe that no disrespect, but the Liberal Party has put forward platform proposals that are just absolutely will take us back decades. And I'm hoping that the people of Powell River-Sunshine Coast recognize that I will continue to work hard. I will continue to speak on issues that are important to me. I will get some successes, and I will not get everything that I want, but I will work very hard for the people of Powell River-Sunshine Coast.
Thank you, Nicholas.
So I really want to thank everybody who put this on, and for those that are filming as well, and to the audience for tuning in to this really important democratic process. So over the last 3.5 years, the BC Greens have shown how politics can be done differently. Entering into this minority government agreement that was based on a New Zealand model, because we hadn't seen that here in British Columbia, really showed a different way of cooperation that, you know, pre-2017, we would have never imagined that the BC legislature could have a bill that would have unanimous consent. So the minority government agreement is not a coalition. That is kind of a misconception. And I remember when Andrew Weaver, who's a friend of mine, when he was signing the confidence and supply agreement, he said something to the effect to John Horgan that now we can put the framework of legislation together and all the parties can put their pieces into it, forming robust legislation that isn't going to change as we see the different, you know, government parties come and go. And I watched John Horgan's light bulb go off where he went, oh my gosh, everything is so different, because the previous 16 years, all the NDP could do was sit on the opposition lines and holler at the BC Liberals as they rammed through legislation. We cannot go back again to having a majority government that doesn't have anyone to have oversight over them. So this election is about making sure that we do not have a majority government. We've shown how well a minority government works when we all cooperate. There are so many issues facing us with climate change, with this pandemic, that should all be nonpartisan issues that we should be working together on. As myself living in this community, everybody knows I'm a get it done type of a person, and I would love to represent you in the BC legislature. We had the largest number of opposition party bills passed in the history of legislature.
Thank you very much, Kim.
Thank you.
And once again, wonderful job to all the candidates. May it be a very good election, and may the best for the province come out. Plain and simple. And for our community of Powell River, of course.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Oh, remember to vote.
Oh, yeah.